Welcome to another episode of the Animals at Home podcast. As usual, thank you so much for tuning in this week. This week I chatted with Bryce Broom of RIghteous Reptiles. It's definitely a little bit strange talking to someone like Bryce because within about 2 seconds of talking to him, you completely forget that he's only 17 years old. Not only does he have a budding YouTube page that is gaining a substantial amount of subscribers, he also has a very unique talent for editing and creating short documentaries. And this is the type of person that we want spearheading the effort to get animals into people's lives. You know, it's easy to get people involved with animals who already have that passion and deep love for animals, but it's another step to try to introduce people to reptiles or animals in general who are typically not animal fans. And I think Bryce is the exact person we need doing this sort of thing. He lives in South Africa, which is an amazing haven for an animal lover. I think if you're an animal lover, this is on your bucket list to go visit South Africa. And immediately Bryce lets us know what it's like growing up there. So it sounds amazing. I think I need to plan a trip there. In the episode, we discuss everything from the large mammal species that live in South Africa to the reptile species, venomous reptiles, including a crocodile farm that Bryce has visited and has some footage of on his YouTube channel. And we also discussed the reptile room that Bryce is building, as well as what his future plans are for the reptile hobby, as well as just his animal passion. So I do really hope you enjoy the conversation. Before we get to that, if you are enjoying the podcast, definitely consider giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes or the podcasting app. And if you would like to buy an Animals at Home t-shirt, definitely go check out animalsathome.ca/shop. $5 for every t-shirt is donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Bryce. Hi, I'm Dillon, and you're listening to the Animals at Home podcast. So joining me today on the podcast is Bryce Broom, all the way from South Africa. So Bryce, thank you so much for being here, and how are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really stoked to be on this podcast. I'm doing amazingly and really excited.
Awesome. Well, I really do feel like you are at the beginning stages of what's bound to be a very successful career. And I feel like if I didn't do this soon enough, you were going to have your own TV show or something, and I'd never be able to track you down.
Wow, thanks. That means a lot.
You do really have a pretty scary amount of talent for such a young guy. Because are you 17 or are you 18 now?
Yeah, I'm 17 now. Next week's actually my birthday.
Oh, okay. So, well, happy early birthday.
17. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so you're a very young guy and you're up to a lot. So we're going to get into all that. But you live in a country that's on almost every animal lover's bucket list, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, I do, for sure.
Tell me what it's like to grow up in South Africa.
Well, it's basically the dream because we have everything from reptiles to mammals to every arachnid you can think of. We've got like the most amazing creatures. We've got obviously the big five. Everybody knows about that. We got such amazing reptiles. We got like the most diverse amount of tortoises anywhere else. There's no other country that has the diversity of tortoises like us. We've got some of the most amazing dwarf chameleons, tons of different snakes. We just have the most amazing wildlife here. And growing up here, it's definitely opened many opportunities for me to get up close and personal with wildlife.
So from a young age, did you just immediately get attracted to any wildlife and everything? Because there's so much going on there in terms of the animals, like you said.
Yes, I definitely loved everything, and yeah, for sure, everything. But I started focusing on more of the unloved animals like your reptiles and that, just because I loved everything and I was like, why does nobody love these creatures? They're just so amazing, and I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't love them. I mean, from a young age, I was holding snakes, catching little geckos and that, and I was like, why are people scared of these animals? They're just so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a common theme that I hear from a lot of people who are into reptiles is they just have this general love for animals, and then you hit that sort of speed bump with reptiles where everybody else kind of steps. That's where everybody else kind of gets off the ride in terms of loving animals, and reptile lovers are like, wait a minute, these are pretty cool as well. So yeah, but in South Africa, obviously, you guys have a pretty wide range of reptiles. In Canada, people don't like reptiles either, really, and we have garter snakes, so there's nothing really to be scared of in that sense. But in South Africa, there's actual like legitimate worry with some of these animals.
Yes, there definitely is. I mean, specifically with your cobras and your puff adders, those are mostly what are encountered when it comes to bites and that, like Mozambican spitting cobra and then your puff adder. Those account for like 80% of the bites here in South Africa. But even saying that, they're not super common. It's not like you're going to walk outside and see one every single day. They're still pretty rare, but the risks are a lot higher, especially in the more rural areas of South Africa.
Are those on a daily basis, people that live in the rural areas? Is that something that they're going to see, or is it mostly people that are going into the fields and working in the outdoors?
It wouldn't be much of a daily basis thing, but it can be pretty frequent in the right season. So like our summer, especially after heavy rains, a lot of the animals and reptiles come out to feed on frogs that have come out and to just go around and bask in the sun in general, especially after our heavy rains. And that's when most encounters happen. So that will be from about, I think it's mainly from November through to March is like the highest peak of when most encounters happen. Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. And it's so foreign for somebody that lives in a place that there's winter 6 months of the year. We don't have these sort of a wide range of reptiles. So I can't even imagine what it's like to be running into wildlife like that. It's very cool. So when you were young, did you have some encounters with animals or experiences that sort of triggered your love for animals even more?
Yes, I can say I have. When I was really, really young, we encountered a black mamba in the wild. I've never seen one since then, although they are pretty common in some areas of South Africa. We were actually on holiday and going on a hiking trip, and my dad spotted this like snake popping its head out of the grass and just like checking us out. And I remember from that moment just being so infatuated with snakes and being like, wow, this is so cool. So my brother and my mom ran off to the chalets and me and my dad just stood there looking at it. I was like, Dad, pick me up, pick me up, because I couldn't see over the tall grass. And it was this black mamba just checking us out, like, because they're pretty curious snakes and they don't really want to have encounters with humans. So after that, it just slithered away. But that was definitely something that I remember clearly, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Does your dad have kind of an equal love for animals, or is obviously your mom and your brother maybe a little more scared of the reptiles? But
yeah, so my dad hasn't feared them, but he doesn't have a particular love for them. He loves all wildlife and animals, but yeah, definitely not scared. But reptiles are definitely something I've just like popped out randomly out of the family, if that makes sense.
So if I know that you've taken lots of footage and film of even animals like the big five and whatnot, how far do you have to travel to get to a sort of a place where you can see some of that larger wildlife?
From where I live, it's actually pretty far. There are different areas that you can go to, but some of the best areas are probably around 6-hour drive from where I live. So because I live more in the central city part of South Africa, Johannesburg, where most of the people are located. So it's not like the perfect paradise for me as a wildlife lover, but it is great that I'm kind of central, so I can go to all these different places because we have such a large variety from like coastal forests to semi-deserts and that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So then at some point you wanted to take your animal passion to the next level and you started your YouTube channel. Do you remember why you did that or what sparked your decision?
Yes, I actually do. I remember when the ball python industry or just started here in South Africa, it was kind of getting big. I was like watching a whole lot of YouTube videos. That was back in 2012 and that. And then in 2015, I was watching this guy. He was predominantly filming ball pythons, and I was like, hey, I think I can do this and share my passion for these snakes with other people. So that's where it started. It originally all started with the ball python because I was like wanting to share my love for these snakes with everyone else, and then it just spanned out to everything else.
Did you already have ball pythons at that time? as a pet?
Yes, I did. For that time, I probably had them for around 3 years before I started YouTube.
Was that the first pet reptile that you had?
It was, yes.
Classic. Ball python's good starter snake.
It definitely is. I mean, so many people like get bored of the snake and that because they're so common. Yes, they're common, but they're still such an amazing species nonetheless. I mean, I owe everything to the ball python because that's what basically got me into this world.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So now that you kind of started your YouTube channel, so going back, I think that was maybe was that two years ago or so, or a little bit more?
It was in 2015, so that was 3 years ago or 4 years ago in July.
Did you have an idea of where, so I guess that's 2015, so that's almost 4 years ago now. Did you have an idea of where you wanted it to go, or you were just kind of starting? And I mean, I'm sure at some point you started to formulate a plan with the channel.
Well, I never really thought where I would go to. I always had a goal of just reaching as many people as I could to share my love and my passion. But I didn't have a goal in the sense that I knew I wanted to be doing this with certain types of animals. I thought I would just be filming ball python stuff at that point or reptile stuff. But now I'm thinking of more branching out into any other animal and sharing our natural world with the internet, basically. I want to share basically like you can't experience what I can experience here, so I want to make the best videos I can so you can kind of experience it as well. Just because I think that's what the internet can do these days, and that's what I want to use it for.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. We don't get to be exposed to all these things. So having someone like yourself that lives there is really incredible to watch some of the videos that you've made. Is there an individual that you kind of use as a role model in terms of how you make videos or in any of the documentaries that you create?
Well, I have a few kind of role models. They're not in the reptile world at all or they're more in the filmmaking world. I watch like Sam Calder, Peter McKinnon, a few different wildlife filmmakers like Brad Besterlink and a few of the Nat Geo guys. Yeah, they definitely have inspired me.
Yeah, because you actually are a very good editor and someone who's, tinker around with editing a little bit. It is such an incredible amount of work. And I don't...
Thank you so much.
I don't love doing it very much. I'll do it a little bit, but you're really, really good at it. And now I know that you recently, in the last few months, have got a new camera because previously you did a lot of it on just your iPhone. I
did, yeah. It's amazing what you can do with this little handy thing that's in your pocket. I mean, the options are endless. I mean, it doesn't look as great, but at the end of the day, I've captured some of the best footage on my phone.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of patience to be able to do that.
It does, especially when your programs keep crashing because it doesn't want to work with iTunes and Adobe. It was the most irritating thing.
The Adobe Premiere hates Apple.
It does, and it sucks.
Yeah, I hear you. I've been there. That's really cool. And that's one of the most interesting things about you is how clearly you have a passion for the filmmaking side of it as well. So
yes,
how did that get how did that marriage happen? Was that something like, were you wanting to film animals and then you decided that, becoming a good editor would kind of fit well with that? Or did you already have an interest in creating film before that?
Well, I never had an interest really in creating film, but I always loved photography from when I was really young, and specifically wildlife photography. And then when I started YouTube, I started learning more about filmmaking and that it's actually not just setting up a camera and clicking the record button. There's so much more behind it than that. And I just want to tell the best stories that I can so people can feel like they're experiencing what I'm experiencing.
Does it feel like it's instinctual, like this is just part of you to be doing that, to be sharing wildlife and creating film for people to see?
Yes, I do. I think I just want to share everything so people can see the wonder and the beauty of our natural world and everything that is in it.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. And right now you're in... So are you graduating this year? I'm not sure how South Africa, if the school's the same in terms of Canada, but you must be graduating soon.
Yes. So this year I should be doing what's called our matriculation. So going to be in matric, and that's basically our last year of school. But it's a bit different because I'm homeschooled, so we're not 100% sure how it's going to work out. So we're going to do some online school and that's it to get my matric.
And then do you have plans on going into university and doing some further education with animals, or are you going to shift your focus right to sort of producing YouTube?
I would actually really love to study something like herpetology, something in that field, herpetology and ecology. I think that would be really something that I want to do, but we'll see how life goes.
Yeah. It's working in a YouTube channel can take up all of your time all of a sudden.
It definitely can, but I also don't want to just focus on the one thing and then not have any other knowledge, because it's the reptiles and my love for the animals that started this. So I would like to learn as much as possible about them so I can make my videos better in the end of the day by sharing that knowledge.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And having a little biology foundation is never a bad thing.
Yes.
So right now, your personal animal collection, I think how many, you have like maybe 10 or 12 animals in your collection?
Yeah, I think I have about 13 snakes and a gecko right now, yeah.
And is there plans for that to grow? Actually, I think you do have plans for that to grow. I was listening to one of your videos.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because I know you're working on a brand new reptile room. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was blessed by my parents, and they're letting me convert our garage, our double garage, into a reptile room. So I'm super excited. So I'm going to use 3/4 of that. We're going to kind of put like a drywall down the middle, and I'm busy insulating it now, getting it ready for some snakes, different types of, I want to kind of go into the rarer animals that aren't readily available or bred in captivity, because I'm not a huge fan of this thing of us taking animals out of the wild. So I would like to learn as much as we can about the animals and then breed them in captivity so that we can give them like a life in captivity rather than taking them out of the wild.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think learning how to breed some of these wilds in a captive setting or wild animals in a captive setting definitely allows us to learn more about the species as well. And you're right, it does sort of protect as a sort of a conservation method as well. What do you have some animals off the top of your head that you would kind of have at the top of your list of things that you'd eventually like to start working with?
Yes, so I would really love to work with dwarf bitters, which is like a dwarf viper here in South Africa or Africa in general, and then in general the whole bitters genus, which is your adders, like your puff adder, gaboon viper, and then particularly like the Ethiopian mountain adder, Bitters paviocula. It's like a really rare snake. It's highly sought after in captivity. There's only a few guys who have bred them. I would like to also get one of those in the future and hopefully help out, because there's always going to be a demand for these animals if they're not bred in captivity. So I don't believe we can really take away that demand and change people's mindset of taking them out of the wild, because there are some people that will just go, destroying the natural world when we can save it and just take a few out and then breed those and then have some captive animals.
Yeah, I totally agree. There is always going to be someone that's going to want an animal in their collection or whatever it is, and if we can kind of thwart some of that off into captive breeding, that really has to be what we do. As long as the captive breeding is done ethically and properly, it doesn't make sense to not do that. Yeah,
I agree. There's definitely a lot of research and that we need to do on these species, because like with the Ethiopian mountain adder, people don't know we don't really know how to care for it. Like ball pythons, we've kind of got to like the pinpoint exactly how to care for them. I mean, how many years ago all the ball pythons that were coming in from Ghana and Togo were all dying because we didn't know how to care for them, and now they're super easy to care for. So we just got to find that mix of how to care for them properly and give them the right care.
Yeah, I totally agree. And right now you don't have any venomous snakes in your collection, is that correct?
Nothing at my place. right now. Yeah.
So is there a license or a permit that you require if you want to own venomous snakes in a private collection?
Only for indigenous animals you need to have permits, and otherwise you can keep any venomous exotic snake as long as you've done a venomous snake handling course and gone through that route. But yeah, all the indigenous stuff needs permits.
Right. And obviously you've gone through the certification process. Can you talk a little bit kind of what that process is like?
Yeah, so it's basically a one-day course where you get trained on how to handle venomous snakes, how to treat snakes, snake bites, and recognize snake bite symptoms, and a whole lot of stuff about particularly our indigenous venomous snakes, what the bite symptoms and the different venoms do, learning all about the medical aid and the first aid for the different bites as well.
What do you think attracted you to working with venomous snakes?
Well, I think it was that they're even more unloved than normal snakes are, because they have such a stigma and fear to them. Every snake then becomes a venomous snake when it's seen out in the wild and then gets killed, which inevitably is not what I'd like at all.
Is the average person in South Africa just totally petrified of snakes, or like would most people try to kill a snake if they saw it?
I would say so, yes. Not necessarily kill it, but most of them are definitely afraid of them and would rather run away and scream, or there is a vast majority that would like to kill the snake as well. And the general method uses like a spade or a shovel to the snake's head and chop it off, and yeah. So that's not cool.
Remove the head and then ask questions later.
Yeah, even though there's so many people that have been bitten by the snakes even when the heads have been chopped off. So because they chop it off, then they think it's safe, and then the snake bites them because it kind of still has a bit of movement and life after it's been so-called killed.
Right, yeah. And now not only does the snake not have a head, you've been bitten by a venomous snake.
Exactly, and that's not nice for yourself and for your bank account.
That's right. Yeah, so I guess in most of the I'm sure all the hospitals are equipped with anti-venom, but it is not a cheap process.
No, it's definitely not cheap, but there are many that don't have anti-venom. There has been a shortage in the recent years, especially with countries bordering South Africa as well. So especially in the rural areas where a lot of bites occur, that's generally where the shortage of anti-venom is.
If you were to have your own breeding kind of group of venomous snakes, would you milk them as well and try to extract venom to I don't know how that works. I know that you can kind of sell the venom to people that make anti-venom.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't do it because it's just a bit risky, and inevitably I don't want to be bitten by the snake. There are ways to do it without necking the snake, but it is stressful on the animals, and there are a few milking facilities in South Africa that provide enough venom to produce anti-venom for basically everywhere. The only thing is I don't think we have enough amount of animals that have been produced to create the anti-venom. So in South Africa, we use horses, and we inject a small amount of venom into the horses and then get the antibodies from the horses. Unlike, I think in the US, they use sheep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such an interesting process, and venomous animals are really just mind-boggling in general. Like it's just and a lot of them are really beautiful. And you posted a video a few weeks ago of visiting one of your friends' venomous collection, and the colors that these animals, it's just incredible.
It is. They're so stunning, and they know they have venom. They know they have the potential to harm you, but most of them don't actually want to use their venom on you. So most of the bites, in fact, are even what we call dry bites. So the snake won't inject the venom because venom, it's taxing on their body to create, and they don't want to waste it on something that's not going to feed them.
Yeah, they might defensively strike at you and not inject
Yes.
venom, which is actually really crazy that they can do that. That they can choose
Yes.
not to inject
They have a
venom.
crazy amount of control.
Yeah, and they seem to be. I'm not putting down non-venomous snakes. Obviously, I have non-venomous snakes, but venomous snakes seem to have just another level of intelligence that the non-venomous don't seem to possess, or they don't move the same. It's something strange.
Yes, I do find that. It's like they kind of know they have the potential to harm you, so they use it in a way. So even our less or our mildly venomous snakes, they tend to act closer to non-venomous snakes than the venomous snakes do. So, but even the venomous snakes, like our cobras and that, they'll strike at you, but they won't even open their mouths at times because they just want to scare you off. So they'll make a nice big hood and hiss at you and strike, but they're not even opening their mouths.
They just want to make you poop your pants.
Yeah, they're just saying, hey, leave me alone. I want to get out of here.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And I know obviously you're very close with Ryan Subrian, and
Yes.
you lost him in the fall due to a snake bite. Tell me how he influenced your passion and love for venomous animals.
Well, in particular, Ryan had like this really calm demeanor of how he handled any venomous snake. So when I first met him, I saw him handle some really mental black mambas and that, and he was the most chilled person I had ever seen handling them, because most guys are like going all crazy, running around the snake. He was staying in one position, just gently picking it up. The snake was coming at him and he was just all chilled and super calm. And that, in the end, the snake picks up on that, and then the snake became quite calm. So Ryan definitely taught me how to love venomous snakes in a deeper way, if that makes sense. So he once told me the biggest thing he can teach me as my mentor is to love the snake and like treat them like a baby. So when you're handling them, don't get all crazy with them, because in the end that will also get you hurt. So he impacted me a lot and greatly with how I look at venomous snakes and how they're just these animals that they don't want to hurt you. They want to live their own life and get away from you. And if you handle them with care and love, they in the end are going to be pretty chilled animals.
Yeah, they sort of can feed off your energy in a way. And if you're panicked and grabbing them tight and, they're slipping through your hands, they're going to start to panic as well, right? That's sort of, they're just responding to you.
And yeah, just like if you grab you grab a human being that you don't know, they're going to try and escape from you. Whereas if you just touch them, they're just going to look like, hey, what was that? It's kind of the same thing.
Right. And I think his accent was actually during a venom extraction, right? He wasn't just handling an animal.
Yes, it was. So he was necking a black mamba and he necked it, and then his one finger slipped and it got pricked on the one fang while he was milking it. So he had to put the snake back in the enclosure, and then 80 seconds later he was unconscious due to anaphylaxis.
That's the one thing with people that work with cobras is they tend to develop that allergy, right? So I'm sure he developed that just over time of working with them, right?
Yes, especially with working with spitting cobras and that, which he did work with because he was producing or helping produce the venom for the anti-venom. So he was definitely exposed to a lot of venom in the air.
Right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden your body starts reacting to it. And it's a real shame that we lost him. But at the same time, the influence that he's had on you obviously is something that you're going to carry through for the rest of your career.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, he was one of the first people that actually treated me not just as a kid who likes reptiles, but someone who's, a friend or a brother that we were learning from each other in a way also. He wasn't just someone who was just teaching me. He was also open to learn, which was one of the coolest things I learned from him. You're never too old or you never know too much to learn.
Definitely. Yeah. So he's clearly a very genuine person. And that's so true. Like there are some people that feel like, and it happens in the reptile hobby a lot, where they just learn something and they think, okay, that's all I ever need to know. And I don't need to advance my level of care. And what I know you've talked about this as well on your channel, but I think you had done a video about sort of the 5 biggest mistakes or lies in the reptile hobby. And that's like a perfect example of people just believing something and never deciding to grow beyond that.
Yes, I mean, we all have our different opinions and different things will work for different people, especially when you're caring for animals. You can't just watch one care guide and care for the animal in that way, because you may be in a different climate, you may be in a different area that you can't provide for the animal the same way. So you got to find what works for you and your animal, because not all animals are the same, even if they're in the same species, because most of them have a pretty wide distribution.
Yeah, exactly. And what is the reptile sort of climate in South Africa like in terms of how people care for them in the hobby? And obviously, I've talked about this lots on the podcast. Is we do have some really, a lot of people take really good care of their animals here, but there's a lot of really bad care and a lot of animals that become sort of disposable cycling toys for young people or people that just don't want to learn how to care for them. Is that a similar issue in South Africa?
Yes, it is, but I wouldn't say it's as big. There's a lot of people that are in the hobby, but I don't think there's that many who totally neglect their animals. There are those every few here and there people, but I don't think the issue is super huge. Because we are a pretty small community here in South Africa, it's not huge. Not many people are in the reptile industry. You can basically see everybody from the whole country at one reptile expo. So, yeah.
So that's interesting, because I think as a reptile hobbyist here in North America, we definitely take for granted how easy things are to come by, like, supplies and equipment. And I'm sure in your experience, I'm sure everything is, one level more difficult to acquire, like thermostats and substrate and whatnot.
Yes, especially when I first started out, because you couldn't order anything online then. Mm-hmm. At least now we have a few suppliers that were able to ship stuff around the country to our door. But in the beginning, it's like going to pet stores and getting all the supplies from a pet store, and most pet stores don't have the right things that you need to care for your animals and reptiles in particular, because it's such a small niche of us.
Right. Do people, is there lots of, one of the things that obviously I speak out a lot against is the sort of the industrialized care, the very, very plain paper towel type setups. Is that an issue in South Africa? Because when I look at the way you care for your animals, there's a lot of enrichment involved in the way you have your animals set up. And I know you always want to have larger cages and whatnot. And I'm definitely. Sure, but is that industrialized sort of style of care an issue there?
I wouldn't. I haven't seen that much of it, because we don't have that many mass breeders, because most of us are just hobbyists.
Right.
Most of the breeders do, however, have them in plain setups and enclosures with not much enrichment, but there's not that many of them out there. So, like most of your venomous breeders, those guys tend to have some of the most elaborate setups in that for their animals, because they've found those setups actually help induce the animals to breed. Whereas most of your other more common stuff like ball pythons and that are kept in plain racks and tubs, just like in the US. So I don't really want to say it's an issue, because I don't want to bash the people that do it. I just also don't agree with that way of caring for the animals as well. But then again, I started out like that, and that's how I first learned how to care for the animal. And I've since progressed from that, and I'm constantly wanting to change my care for my animals, because I never think I've gotten to the right point where we're giving our animals as much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. You always want to leave that place to grow and the opportunity to develop yourself as a hobbyist as well. And that was one thing that I thought was really interesting. And when you were at, I forget your friend's name who has that giant venomous collection. I think it started with a B as well.
Blake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His enclosures are beautiful. They're really, really well done. So I didn't realize that's why he actually, the intention behind that was to induce the breeding behavior.
Not only that, just because he and most of the guys there absolutely love the animals, and they just look so much better in setups that complement the animal. So it's also a lot easier to care for them when their setup is correct. So yeah, he is absolutely in love with his animals, and he also wants to totally get out of racking systems and stuff like that and go totally into naturalistic stuff. I mean, if he had his way, he'd have a house full of rooms that just have venomous snakes, and they each have their own room with a naturalistic setup and waterfall and whatever.
Yeah, no, I know. That's kind of what we end up getting to. We're like, damn, how big of a cage? I could go huge. Like, you just keep wanting to expand.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I always get stuck, because I find myself going down that path, and then I get, well, why do I own them then if I keep progressing to the point where it seems like I should almost just let them go into the wild type thing? But I do think there are people like yourself who there is value in owning these captive bred animals in order to educate and conserve, because a lot of the exposure to these reptiles does help conserve.
Yes, I agree. I also find myself thinking, like, why do we keep them? But I think us as humans, we have this thing of we just want stuff. And it sounds weird and crazy, but like we don't need all the clothes we have. We don't need the stuff we have, but we want it. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I think keeping these animals actually induces so many more people to fall in love with them. Because if someone sees a snake out in the wild, they're most likely going to freak out. But if I can take a snake out and they can handle it and see, wow, this creature is actually pretty interesting and how it moves is just so out of this world, then they fall in love with it. And the next time they see a snake in the wild, they're not going to be like, oh, this is a crazy snake, I got to kill it, or run away screaming.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, humans do want stuff. That's for sure. And we do kind of get stuck in where some people need a hobby, and as long as the hobby can be positive, I think there's nothing wrong with it, because, you know, a lot of people use the hobby to entertain themselves in a way that if they weren't doing it, they may be up to something negative, or they may even, some people, you know, get over depression and whatnot from having a hobby in their life. So I think there's definitely some positives to it. You've made some really cool wildlife films, like very short, just wildlife films. Do you have plans on creating more in the future?
Yes, I definitely would love to, especially now that I have a camera to do so, because everything else was like on my iPhone, and then the one was filmed on a camera that I was given. But yeah, so I'd love to film with my new camera, and I don't have particularly plans to do one in the near future. I just basically will film whatever happens and then create a story from that.
Right. It's really amazing that you did some of those filming or some of those films with an iPhone. Like, how are you getting so close? I guess you can get quite close to some of these animals, like you're like those, you know, water buffalo and whatnot. Like, it seems like you must be close if you're filming on an iPhone.
Yes, I think most of those shots there were with a camera that had a pretty decent zoom and that. An old camera though, but I did use a lot of my iPhone's shots, but here you can get pretty close to them. We were actually recently in a place where elephants surrounded us. It was a pretty epic moment and a heart-racing moment, because we were surrounded by these elephants. The babies were trying to play with our car and flapping and looking at themselves right in the car. And these animals, when you're so close to them, and they're wild animals, you can see how big and majestic they are. And it was an amazing experience for sure.
I can't imagine. It's any animal like that. If you've not seen it in person, a picture does not justify the size. It's what I found. Like, when you see it in person, you're like, oh my God, I've never seen an elephant in person. So how worried were you?
I wasn't worried at all, because I've done quite a bit of research on how they behave and that. So we just stayed still, switched off the car engine, and just let them go through. There wasn't any bulls around, because generally the bulls are the naughty ones, especially when they're in must. and all hormonal and stuff, but it was just a bunch of mommies, the matriarch and and their babies. So they were just pretty inquisitive. The adults didn't really come do anything to the car. They just came and walked past to graze on the other side of the road, whereas the babies were kind of interested in like what this car is, flapping their ears at it, looking all playful and that.
That's amazing. That is, I can't, it's like I said, it's really impossible for me to imagine what it must be like to have that happening in your own country. Like we have deer, like that's all we have. I feel like, so out of the big five, can you remind me the big five? It's a water buffalo, elephant, lion. Is it leopard?
Well, it's Cape buffalo is what we call it here. So Cape buffalo, lion, leopard, elephant, and rhino.
Oh yeah, and rhino. Have you actually had a chance to see all of those?
Yes, yeah. You can see them pretty frequently if you go to the right places. Rhino have definitely become a lot more scarce in the recent years to see, especially the black rhino. I've never seen one of those in the wild. But you can see them if you drive and know where to look. So yeah, I've had the privilege of seeing all of those. Even leopard cubs, which was one of the coolest sightings, because leopards are quite elusive animals and they like to, stay away from people.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I do remember seeing one of the clips where you had found a leopard kill. I don't know if it was what was in the tree, but people that don't know, I'm sure lots of people do that. Leopards often kill their prey and then drag it up into a tree, and that's amazing to see.
And that's because there's so many other predators that are out there that try to steal from the leopard, like hyenas, lions especially. And yeah, because they're only one animal, whereas most of these other animals work in groups. Right. So that's just a way of getting it out so they can eat it and enjoy it for themselves.
Right. Is poaching a pretty bad issue in South Africa?
Yes, with rhinos, it's a pretty big deal. There's quite a few rhinos that get poached every year. I think a few years ago, the statistics were like 1 every 9 hours is poached.
Wow.
So that became a massive amount of rhinos. Now it's less just because the amount of rhinos out there is now drastically decreased. So there are some amazing things that we are doing to try prevent that, but at the end of the day, we got to try and get rid of this demand because there's nothing valuable in rhino horn. It's the same as your nails and hair. It's made from keratin. Right.
Yeah, because they are being poached exclusively for their horns, and I think the body's often just left behind as well, right?
Yes, all of the bodies, in fact, and they generally get brutally hacked off and while they're still alive, even if the calf is watching. So a lot of calves get traumatized and depressed because they've watched their mothers go through this. And most calves don't really get killed because they hardly have any horn on them. So there are a few facilities here where they have started trying to reintroduce those calves back into the wild.
Yeah, it's really sad that is actually happening. And is it the South African market that's taking the or I know a lot of in Asia is kind of where these horns end up. Is that predominantly where the horns are being sold, or?
I think so. It's obviously all an underground thing getting smuggled out of the country because it is illegal here.
Right.
You're not allowed to poach and that. So it is getting smuggled out of the country and then to the Asia and other countries in Asia.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
One of the other experiences that I think is very foreign to people that aren't from South Africa would be the crocodile farms. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are like and the purpose that they serve?
Yeah, so in South Africa, we have quite a number of crocodile farms here. And the croc farms are mainly to breed crocodiles for their skin and their meat product, mainly their skin, and then that gets exported into Europe and that. So for handbags, boots, and all that sort of stuff. So croc farms they're not really a nice thing because there's so many animals and conditions aren't the best. But at the end of the day, they're saving wild crocodiles because one of the biggest threats to crocodilians is poaching, specifically our Nile crocodile, poaching for their leather. And yeah, in fact, now, because there's so many croc farms, most of it's due to pollution and human-wildlife conflict that these crocs are still getting killed for.
Yeah, on the surface, when you say it, it's like, oh, we have a farm of crocodiles that are for handbags. It sounds bad, and I know you imagine a lot of people wouldn't like it, but at the same time, like you said, it's actually one of those things where if we didn't have it, it's going to happen anyway, and it'll have way more drastic consequences if you're pulling these animals from the wild.
Exactly. Yes, that's so true. I mean, I don't know why we need so many crocodilian products, but at the end of the day, I think it's okay because we are breeding them for that purpose, just like cattle are being bred to produce meat for us humans. I think that at the end of the day, I don't like it, but hey, we are saving the wild crocs, so I'm super stoked on that. And these animals, they do get a lot of food and they get cared for pretty well, considering, because they're pretty durable animals. They're like the tanks of the reptile world. I mean, they can survive anything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, crocodiles are basically indestructible, it seems like, and yeah,
crazy.
It's definitely. It's a kind of a bad situation. It's an okay solution to sort of a bad situation. You're right. Like, it would be nice if we didn't feel like we needed crocodile skin boots and purses.
Yes.
And ideally in the future, that's something that we can, maybe let go of. But for now, it's kind of the best next thing, really.
Yeah, I agree. Because then at the end of the day, if we start putting restrictions on like that also, I feel, do we all become like become vegans and that, and not eat any other animals? Or how does it work? Because there's not really enough space on this planet that we can do all the good stuff, like naturally hunt the animals and only use what we need. We have to have some of these commercial farms.
Yeah. It becomes difficult to draw a line for where we should sort of stand. And yes. You're right. We can't hunt. Everybody can't go out and hunt. We don't have time.
Exactly.
And I know a lot of people that would say, well, maybe there should be less people or something. And I'm definitely not one of those people. I do think that it's just good to learn a way to manage it in a way that's not as bad as it would be if we didn't have, something like a crocodile farm.
We gotta find a way to all work together and live together in harmony, I think, at the end of the day, because I think, yes, us as humans are kind of the superior living being or whatever, but that doesn't mean we must neglect everything, or we shouldn't neglect anything for that matter at all. We should try to make the best of what we have. Yeah,
I totally agree. What is your personality like offside the camera? Are you a fairly extroverted person, or like, because you're very outgoing in front of the camera and you do a really good job of explaining the animal you're holding and whatnot. Is that how you are in your everyday life, or do you kind of have to transition a little bit for when you're on film?
I think it's particularly when I'm working with something that I love, that's when the energy comes out. But in general, I'm pretty chilled and relaxed. I have definitely come out of my bubble, so-called, because of YouTube and that. So now I'm a lot more outgoing and extroverted than I was previously. I was kind of more of a shy person, but now I love talking to people, and yeah, I just love people. Also, yeah. And I know that you've had some, like Brian Barczyk has come down to South Africa and chatted with you. How did that? Tell me about that. Well, so I first met Brian actually in 2015, like literally just before I started YouTube. And at that time, I didn't know where I standed with him because he was just doing like with Animal Bites TV, and I kind of stopped watching his content and that because it became very clickbaity and just not what I was watching and that. And then I met him, and he's a really great guy, and he's really great. And then last year, I think I had his number or whatever, and we were just in contact throughout the months, planning his trip here to South Africa. And then I met him up again. Obviously, he didn't remember from me from 2015 and that. But yeah, we had a great time here. He's a really great guy, and he's super knowledgeable, and he doesn't let people know how knowledgeable he actually is. He's a good guy. I don't agree with everything that he does and that, but at the end of the day, I can still be friends with him. Friends don't have to agree on everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, and that is a really common response that I get from people who've actually met him. Like, obviously, Brian tends to have a little bit of radioactivity around him in the hobby because there are certain people who absolutely hate him. And I've never met him, but I would be sort of in the same boat as you are, as I definitely don't agree with some of the stuff he does, but I actually really appreciate a lot of the stuff he's doing now, especially with the zoo, and he's clearly a very knowledgeable person. So it kind of goes back to that. We need to allow people to grow. We've already kind of mentioned this, and it's something that, Ryan had taught you. Growing your knowledge base is super important, and clearly Brian does that. Clearly he's evolved from, making snakes bite him on snake bites to having a really wonderful, zoo.
But at the end of the day, what I think he was doing there was also really beneficial to the reptile hobby in general. Yes, us reptile keepers may not agree with it, but at the end of the day, your average person is not just going to click on a video of like information about snakes. They want the worldly, gory stuff. They're attracted to that clickbait, and in the end, that's what gets them to click, and then they get converted through that. So I definitely think there is a method to what he was doing there as well. Yeah,
it's people do get really upset with clickbait, but there's a reason that clickbait works is because people click on the clickbait. So if the people would stop clicking on it, we would transition away from it. But everyone's like, oh, what's that? I'll click on that. And then, oh, it's clickbait. This is stupid. It's like, well, you clicked on it. That's why we have clickbait.
Especially with people who aren't into animals and love them. They're not going to click on something that's like, all the facts you need to know about a Nile crocodile. They're going to click on something like Nile crocodile tries to kill kid type of thing. And then they'll get that information from the video. And in the end, that's what I'm there to do. So yeah, it's kind of a weird slippery slope if you keep going on it, but we got to find that intermediate line or whatever.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's obviously introducing more people to the hobby is great. And now what Brian's up to is really interesting. And I think that the zoo is a really positive influence on the hobby. And I mean, then you have that sort of side of the hobby that ends up on social media, like Facebook. And I really actually avoid Facebook almost completely because of how crazy it is. It's almost like the worst thing that's ever happened to the hobby is Facebook, because there's very little positive. Like there are some, you can learn some care stuff, but it turns into just a nightmare.
Yes, all about rants and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, what is all this negativity going to help anyone? Exactly. It doesn't help anything or anyone, so there's no point for it. Why not rather like share the positive?
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with differing opinions, but attacking people is what happens all the time. And I think I'm fortunate in the case where I'm just I hate typing. I hate typing so much that it really like allows me to completely avoid Facebook, because I see something that I like to respond to, but then I think, God, I don't want to type.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. I also don't like typing at all. And sometimes it's just not worth the effort of like responding to that hate in that as well. I mean, sometimes people have nothing better to do other than hate. And that's kind of sad in itself as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's why having a YouTube channel where they can see, someone like yourself can see your face and how you interact and how you speak is a lot better than when someone comments on a Facebook, because there's sort of disconnect. And when we can watch a video like yourself, then there's a person behind the information rather than just a random profile picture of like a skull with a snake crawling through it type thing.
Yeah. And people definitely, we kind of learn to read each other, and it's a lot better seeing someone on a video than just like typing out harsh words or whatever, because they can be taken totally incorrectly. Like I can say something when I type and I can say it in person and it can sound like two different things because it has been taken in the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. Totally out of context. This hour has flown by. I have a couple other things that I wanted to quickly touch base on before I let you go. I know in South Africa, you had mentioned, I already known this, and then you had kind of mentioned it on one of your videos, maybe a couple weeks ago, is that you have, there's what's called load shedding in South Africa. And so you have these like rolling blackouts. Maybe you could explain that for a second for people that don't know what that is. And then two, will that affect the way you care for your animals? Is there anything that you can do to deal with power outages?
Yeah, so load shedding, it's something that really sucks here. So it's basically, well, what we got told recently is the country has no money for coal to pay the coal suppliers. So they have to cut our power out for certain times every day, if not longer than that, or for a few days, because there's no money to provide power. So we can get switched off from hours at a time to days at a time with no electricity whatsoever. Obviously, as a reptile keeper, that really sucks, especially when you're dependent on these heat sources and that. It's not so bad in our summer because we have obviously a nicer heat here in Africa. But I know a lot of my friends have lost some really like endangered animals that were some of the first bred in captivity due to load shedding and the incubators being switched off. So I'm definitely keeping that in mind when I'm building my new reptile room. So I'm trying to insulate it better so the heat stays in the enclosures. Eventually, I'm wanting to switch over to solar, completely solar. Right now, I have a generator to run my reptile room while there is no electricity, so everything's still fine. Obviously, that's not ideal because the fuel cost is quite expensive, as well as the noise is jolly irritating.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of a struggle because you don't always know when it's going to happen. Sometimes it just randomly gets switched off, and that's often when my videos get delayed in that, because I don't know when I'm going to have power to upload or not, or to film. So yeah.
Was it on a daily basis this happens, or it'll just be random every couple days?
So about a month ago, it was happening on a daily basis, sometimes even twice a day. So we're getting switched off up to like 6 hours a day, twice a day. But now it's completely stopped. Apparently we're going to have electricity and we're all fine. But I'm expecting it to start kicking in again soon, because it's becoming colder here, and then people start using heaters and that, which uses up a lot more electricity, and then we'll obviously have less, so they may start load shedding or switching our power off more frequently.
Right. And
in winter, that's not something that's fun. Definitely a stressful event.
Yeah, and it's totally something that most people are not, especially in North America, that doesn't happen obviously very often. So it's kind of an interesting and difficult challenge in the reptile hobby. A couple of weeks ago, my power went out, and it was actually during the middle of a podcast, and I was just so mad. It's like, damn, why is the power going out? And then I kind of started to realize, like, I'm fortunate that I live in a place where this is like happens almost never, and it was back on in like 15 minutes type thing.
That's crazy. It's definitely not something that happens too often, but it happens more frequently than it should, if I can say. So it generally happens at some times when we don't have coal, or the power stations need to be replaced or fixed. And then that can happen for weeks at a time constantly. And then at other times we'll have power without any issues whatsoever.
Mm. Have you had any success growing food in your garden that you built?
Yes, I actually have. I should do a video on that. I actually have grown some really great organic, non-GMO vegetables and stuff like that. But I sold all of those at a local farmer's market and that. And recently I haven't had time for it, so it's become more of a weed bed right now. And I'm focusing more on working on my reptile room, so I don't have time for that currently. But once the reptile room's up and running and I actually have space for the animals that I want to get that will eat those greens, then I will probably start that up again.
What animals were you going to get that were going to eat the greens that you grow?
I was thinking of quite a few different things, like your Peter's banded skinks. They're not bred in captivity. There was a few that were getting imported into the country. Then I also just basically wanted to have the options to have fresh greens if I ever were to get an animal that needed it. Right now I'm thinking of also doing it for rodents, because I'm going to start breeding my rats again, because I kind of stopped that for a while. But it's becoming quite expensive with all the snakes I'm getting, and I think I should start it up. So I think also feeding some fresh stuff to the rodents won't be bad for my snake's health in the end.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I keep watching your videos of you working on things like your garden and then your new reptile room, and you seemingly keep hurting your back. As a 17-year-old, you got to keep that back like loose, man.
Thanks. I was actually at the chiropractor yesterday. I had a bunch of needles stuck into me, so I'm feeling all weird and funny today. But yeah, the thing is, I don't really like waiting for myself to recover. I kind of feel better and then I want to do stuff. I don't like sitting around and doing nothing. I like being active and working on things.
Yeah, and I know exactly the mode that you get into, especially when you're working on something like a big project, like a new reptile room. Like, I'm sure you're just like me, where you won't eat, you'll stop doing everything, and the time goes by insanely fast. And yeah, you're gonna work through like any injury you get, like just dragging things and whatever.
Exactly. There was so much blood, sweat, and frustration on this reptile room in particular. It's crazy, but yeah, I've enjoyed all of it, and I've actually been pretty proud of what I've been able to do by myself. I mean, moving all those things was a pretty big deal for me to do by myself.
Yeah, and you use a lot of recycled materials. You're kind of just going into the the used areas and Craig. I don't know if you guys have Craigslist or what you have there, but you're clearly getting secondhand things to build your.
Yes, well, a lot of it actually came from my dad, my grandfather, and then just stuff that people throw out and leave lying around. But then I have recently purchased some stuff like underfloor heating and thermostats for the reptile room from secondhand pages like on Facebook and stuff like that. Yeah.
Do you have a goal for when you want to have that finished?
Well, I kind of want to have a goal to finish it, but I know I need money if I want to set that goal. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to force that also, because I do have a friend who's actually helping me out in building cages for me currently, but he's constantly busy. So he's not really able to work on it at any time because he has other work to do as well, which comes first before this. So I would preferably like to get the whole room, well, should I say just all of my reptiles that I currently have in cages in the new reptile room by the end of our winter. So hopefully even end of May, which is beginning of winter, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely look forward to seeing that when it's up, and I'm enjoying the updates on it so far. In terms of the future for you and your channel, do you have anything in mind?
Yes, I would definitely like to start focusing more on wild animals and going out and seeing different things. So also visiting other people's collections and not just doing my own animals, and then getting information from a lot of different professionals out in their fields. So like go to herpetologists that study specifically crocodilians or animals like that, and go catch crocodiles in the wild and study them with the herpetologist, and do kind of like that more outgoing stuff and hands-on with the animals, so people can see just the beauty of them in their natural habitat as well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yes, so I have a YouTube channel. You can just search up RIghteous Reptiles. And then on Instagram, I have 2 pages or whatever, Bryce_Broom, Broom as in like sweep, and then RIghteous_Reptiles. Yeah.
Awesome. And of
that's
course,
where you can find me.
And I'll have everything in the show notes for everybody to find. And actually, I didn't know that you had a second Instagram page, so I'm going to have to go follow that. I think I only follow your personal page.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't really post on the RIghteous Reptiles one too much, but yeah, I'm wanting to branch out a lot more and like start a podcast like you too. I think that's going to be a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, definitely start a podcast. And if you need any advice, definitely shoot me a message, because I'd love to help you out with that. And I've really enjoyed the podcast, so I'm sure you'll enjoy doing it as well.
I've enjoyed your podcasts too. They're epic.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that people are liking them. So if you do that, definitely let me know. And until then, thank you so much for coming on. The hour literally flew by. I can't believe it's already an hour's gone by. So that was really great.
Wow.
Thanks so much.
It was awesome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that is the end of another episode. As usual, thank you so much for listening. Bryce, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for joining me. I do really appreciate it. I had a fantastic time chatting with you. South Africa is now on my bucket list, and when I do make it there, I will give you a shout and we can hang out. I'd love to see your new reptile room. As for everybody else, make sure you go check out Bryce's YouTube, Instagram, and everything. Everything is in the show notes. And if you are looking to support the podcast in any way, make sure you go to animalsathome.ca/podcast to learn more. Talk to you later.